Hi there. I've just heard the most inspiring story, and I thought I'd just quickly share it with you. The story is about three things. It is about the type of world that I think we should be creating. It's about the reason that I moved from growing up as a conservative person to moving to becoming a more liberal person. Secondly, it's about women and about how prejudice is still significant in the world. And thirdly, and in a very, very small way, it's about the US midterm elections coming up. It's the story of Amy McGrath. Amy was the first woman to ever fly an active combat role as a Marine Corps pilot. Um, and she's now running for the United States Senate in Kentucky, going up against the incumbent Republican. Her story is remarkable. A few months ago, her campaign video went viral. Millions of views, and she's gained lots of support on the back of this story. So quickly, have a look at that video.
When I was 12 years old, I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I grew up. I wanted to fly fighter jets and land on aircraft carriers because that's the toughest flying you can do. When I was 13, my congressman told me I couldn't fly in combat. He said Congress thought women ought to be protected and not allowed to serve in combat. I never got a letter back from my Senator Mitch McConnell. I then wrote every member of the House and Senate Armed Services Committees asking them to change the law. I said they just hadn't met me yet, and I knew I could do it, but most of them told me I couldn't. Then I got into the Naval Academy, and wouldn't you know, that's when they changed the law. I'm Amy McGrath, and I love our country. I spent 20 years as a U.S. Marine, flew 89 combat missions bombing Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. I was the first woman Marine to fly in an F-18 in combat, and I got to land on aircraft carriers. Now I'm running for Congress against Andy Barr in my home state of Kentucky. He's Mitch McConnell's hand-picked congressman who said he would vote enthusiastically to take health care away from over 250,000 Kentuckians. Mr. Barr, my mom is a polio survivor who became one of the first women to graduate from UK medical school. A lot of people told her she couldn't achieve her dreams either, but she persevered and ended up treating many of the same kind of people whose health care you and Mr. McConnell would take away. This is my new mission: to take on a Congress full of career politicians who treat the people of Kentucky like they're disposable. Some are telling me a Democrat can't win that battle in Kentucky, that we can't take back our country for my kids and yours. We'll see about that.
Yes, it's an amazing story, and I was just listening to a podcast, which I'll actually put at the end of this video so that you can listen to it as well, which just went into a little bit more detail. At the age of 12, Amy decided she wanted to become a combat pilot, but at that stage, America actually had a law prohibiting women from doing it. So she wrote to all of her congressmen, she wrote to all of the senators and congresspeople who were involved in the armed services committees. And here's what she discovered. The Republicans, the conservative voices, all wrote back to her and said, "You're a woman, go and do something else." The Democrats all wrote back to her, the liberals and progressives, and said, "You know what? You're right. You should at least have the chance to compete. You might not. It might not be appropriate for women to have this role in society, in the military, but you should at least be able to compete to see if you can." And that, as she said, is how she became a Democrat. And that's been my experience as well. This is the type of world that I think we should be creating, a world in which everybody has the right and the opportunity to compete, to be and to do whatever they want to do. And we need to build and live in a society that actually lifts people up and gives them not just the opportunity, but supports them in developing them to the point at which they can honestly, on a level playing ground, take the opportunity to see if they have what it takes. So it isn't just about opening the door and saying, well, walk through it if you can. It's about actually working out how, in which ways the system has actually crippled you in the past, correcting those issues first, and then providing you with an equal basis opportunity. Amy, as an individual person, was bold and strong enough. I mean, she looks like one hell of a person, to actually go ahead and not just change the rules around who could become a pilot, but become a combat pilot herself. First of all, playing a backseat role because she didn't quite have the 20/20 eyesight she needed, then going and getting corrective surgery and coming back through the training once again to finally make it to be the first woman combat pilot in the Marine Corps. So she's just a special person, and often it takes an extraordinary, literally superhuman person to trailblaze, but also to identify the weakness and the essential prejudice built into the system. So for me, her story prompted once again a reflection on what type of society I want to live in, and what type of society I will support, a society that not only creates equal opportunities, but enables people to develop to a point where they can take those opportunities. Of course, the story you can see is about women and how women are treated in society. But thirdly, it's also about the American midterms. I really hope that Amy wins them. Our problem is, as we look at other elections around the world, recently Brazil electing this white, well, not white, I suppose, but a complete right-wing nationalist. America's got that. A lot of the Brexit debate is about this. A lot of European countries are dealing with this. This is the backlash. The backlash based often in privilege, whether that's white privilege or not. It's mainly economic privilege that people have. Trying to protect that from people who don't have it. I don't want to live in a world that protects those with privilege from those who haven't had access to those privileges before. I don't want to live in that world. I am somebody who has privilege. I have privilege of gender. I have privilege of sexuality. I have privilege of whiteness. I have privilege of economic status. I have privilege of language. There are so many ways in which I have been privileged just simply by birth, genetics, and the universe. And I don't want to live in a world where I protect that privilege. I want to live in a world where I use that privilege to create opportunities for other people. This is not a zero-sum game, this thing we call society. We can raise other people. And in so doing, I believe, raise ourselves. So Amy's story inspired me this morning. I hope in some small way it inspires you. And if you are from Kentucky, I hope it inspires you to vote for her. I'm going to now finish this video by putting the audio podcast I listened to. It's from a podcast called Pod Save America. And I'm just going to leave Amy's face on the screen for you to watch while you listen to that audio. This has been a little bit different from the normal thing that our team at Tomorrow Today and Future Smart Parent put out. But I was inspired, and I thought I would try and inspire you to see the world differently and to change the way that you engage with the world around you. Have a great day. Change the world.
We've been sharing stories of candidates in the run-up to the midterm elections. So today we're going to hear from the first woman to fly a combat mission for the Marine Corps.
She's a Democrat, she's a woman, and she's a military veteran.
This is an extreme liberal named Amy McGrath.
So the question is not who Donald Trump is. America knows who he is. The question is, who are we? And folks, I'll tell you who we are. We're Amy McGrath.
When I was a United States Marine, my oath was to the United States Constitution. It was not to a president. It was not to a political party. That's the same attitude I will bring to Congress. It's time.
Amy McGrath is a Democratic congressional nominee for Kentucky's 6th District. She's running against Republican incumbent Andy Barr.
Kentucky 6 is central Kentucky. It's Lexington and the surrounding 18 counties. It's very much an urban core of Lexington, but then 60% of the population is more rural. Goes out as far east as Wolfe County, which is closer to eastern Kentucky. It's a district that has a lot of agriculture. It's horse country, lots of bourbon, and UK Wildcats. But I was a tomboy. Growing up, I was the youngest of 3 kids, and I loved sports. I used to beat the boys in pretty much every sport imaginable.
But you can only win competitions when you're allowed to enter. When she was 11 years old, she saw a documentary on the History Channel,
which had these fighter jets, these jets flying onto the backs of aircraft carriers. And I basically fell in love. I mean, I looked at that documentary and I said, that is cool. That's what I want to do. I'm going to do that. As I started to look at, well, how do you become a naval aviator? How do you fly jets on the backs of aircraft carriers in combat? Well, those were all men. And there was actually a federal law prohibiting women called the Combat Exclusion Law.
We're talking the 80s here. Back then, women weren't allowed to become fighter pilots. But even at the age of 12, Amy was no pushover. She decided that if the law wasn't right, she was going to try and change it.
I remember going to my mom and saying, hey, Mom, let's just change the law. I mean, how hard can it be, right? I can do this. I'm beating all the boys in basketball and soccer and everything else. I can do this. And she was the one who taught me, well, Amy, you have to advocate for change. You have to write your member of Congress. Well, what's Congress? And that's how I had to learn about government. So I wrote my member of Congress. He was a pretty conservative guy by the name of Jim Bunning. And he wrote me back a fairly condescending letter, which basically said, you're a girl, go do something else.
Now, that was an awful letter to send to anyone, let alone a child. But Amy didn't let it stop her.
And then I wrote my senators. Of course, Mitch McConnell never wrote me back. But I didn't give up. I wrote every member of the House and Senate Armed Services Committees. And by that point, I was 12 or 13 years old. And I got several letters back. Many of them were just like Jim Bunning's that said, go do something else. Women shouldn't be doing these things in our military.
Fortunately, not all of the letters were so discouraging.
That was my first understanding of the difference between Democrats and Republicans at that time, because all of the Republicans said, no, go do something else. And the Democrats that wrote me back never said to me, you're a woman, you deserve that place in the cockpit. They never said that. What they said was, you ought to be able to compete. And if you're good enough, if you can qualify, if you can meet the standards, you should be able to do that job whether you're a man or a woman. And that made a huge impression on me at the age of 13. And it's maybe why I'm a Democrat today.
Amy still wanted to be a fighter pilot, and she stayed committed to changing the combat exclusion law throughout her childhood.
I was a one-issue voter before I was even a voter.
And in 1993, the year Amy turned 18, she got some good news.
I didn't have to fight it as an adult because we had a new administration, a new Congress. They rescinded the law. They changed the policy and opened doors for women in the military that had never been opened before, combat ships, combat aircraft. And it literally changed my life because I went into the U.S. Naval Academy 2 months later, raised my right hand to swear and defend the Constitution of the United States, and all the doors were open to me. After I graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy, I was commissioned as a Marine Corps officer because the Marines were the best, the toughest, and that's what I wanted. And you could also fly fighter jets in the Marine Corps. So to me, that was a win-win.
Because Amy didn't have 20/20 vision, she started as a backseater, which is a weapons system officer. She did combat tours in Afghanistan and Iraq after 9/11, and then got vision correction surgery and eventually got her dream job.
And then I went back to that same squadron as a fighter pilot, deployed again to Japan and the Far East, and then again to Afghanistan in 2010.
During her career, Amy was on 85 combat missions. And after spending 12 years doing the most dangerous job imaginable, Amy found her next battlefield. She got into politics.
I went to Capitol Hill. I was a congressional fellow. I had just gotten back from Afghanistan, and I worked for a member of Congress for a year, and then went into the Pentagon for a 2-year tour as the Marine Corps' liaison to all other federal government agencies.
After a few years in D.C., Amy began teaching at the Naval Academy. It was this experience that ultimately inspired her to run for office.
One of the courses I'm teaching them is basic U.S. government. And what I found was that my students had lost faith in their political leadership. Ideas like character, integrity, honor, these things my students didn't see in the political leadership. And the 2016 elections were what fundamentally changed me as a Marine Corps officer, but also as an American. And I realized that, we have an entire generation now that's losing faith in their political leadership, and this isn't, who we are. I took a step back after the results of those elections in 2016 and said, oh my gosh, this comes down to leadership. And that's something that the Naval Academy taught me. It's something the Marine Corps taught me. And we need better leaders in this country, and we need them now. And, I'm not perfect and I don't know everything, but I know leadership. And that's when I decided, we need to step up. I'm a Marine. I'm somebody that runs toward the fight, not away from it. And the fight right now is for our country. And the fight right now is to win back this Congress.
Amy started running towards the fight by announcing her campaign with a video that tells her story. The video went viral, getting 1 million views and helping her raise $300,000 in just 2 days.
When I was 12 years old, I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I grew up. I wanted to fly fighter jets and land on aircraft carriers because that's the toughest flying you can do. Now I'm running for Congress against any bar in my home state of Kentucky. And we didn't know that it was going to, but I think it tapped into what a lot of America is feeling. We love our country. Many of us fought for our country, and we're proud of that. I always say I don't stand for liberal values or conservative values. My husband's a Republican. I'm a Democrat. That's America. I stand for American values. And that, manifests itself in let's having leaders that, care about not kicking people off of health care. I mean, it is as basic as that. So I think that's what that video really just sort of fired people up.
But Amy's campaign has also fired up the opposition, and they've been going negative.
I mean, people warned me about the problems with politics in America today, and I knew it. I watched it. Being the person that's in it with, 20 attack ads and $3 million been spent to attack me, just getting my hair cut this morning, and I look up at the TV, and I look up, and the moment I look up, there's another attack ad.
Amy's campaign hasn't spent a cent on attack ads.
I'm going to keep my message strong. I've decided from the very beginning, that I wanted to run a substantive campaign, and I want to be positive because that's what our country needs right now. People are tired of attack ads. They're tired of the lies. Many people don't trust government. That's why they check out and why they don't vote. They don't know what to believe. And I'm somebody that, the basic core of good leadership, what I learned in the United States military is the basic core is trust. It's trust. It's telling the truth. It's honesty. And so we've got to get back to that. And that's why I don't want to, attack back in the same manner.
Instead of slinging mud, Amy chose to stay focused on the issues.
It's personal to me because my mother was a doctor. She was one of the first women to graduate from the University of Kentucky Medical School. I have had my entire adult life with mom talking to me about health care in America, mental health care in America. And so I have some idea of that. My mother's also a breast cancer survivor. My father was dealt with cancer for 14 years as well. So, I mean, it's very, very personal to me. I understand at a very basic level that if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And so it's also personal, and this is the reason why it's the number one issue, to the voters here in the 6th District. I mean, people are seeing their premiums rise. They're seeing the incumbent in the seat and an administration that votes continually to try to take health care away from people. So, that's why it's the number one issue in my race.
One healthcare topic that really bugs Amy is the idea that a male-dominated Congress is making healthcare decisions about female reproductive health. Part of why she's running is to advocate for her constituents, but she's also running because she's a woman. You
can't change things unless you're in the room. You have to be there. We have to have a voice. So I think women are starting to see that. The studies show that women win at the same rate as men, But the reason we have such a lower percentage of women in places like Congress is that we don't run, okay, at the same rate. And so I think that is coming to light too, and a lot of women around the country, and certainly here in Kentucky. I mean, we are seeing record number of women in Kentucky running at the state level. That's how you change that. You got to run.
Amy's gotten the attention of a lot of voters, but she's also earned the support of one of the Democratic Party's biggest names.
I was fortunate enough to have former Vice President Biden come to help me with my campaign, which was amazing and awesome. And we went out to Bath County, a more rural county here in the district. We had an amazing rally. And, you know, I'm really proud of that. We fired a lot of people up.
This is America. So get up. Take it back. It's time.
I think the lesson that we have to learn as Democrats from 2016 is we have to compete everywhere. You can't just focus on the cities, and that's what I'm trying to do. I want to go out. I want to make sure that everybody in this district knows that I want to represent everybody, that there isn't a county that I'm not going to compete in, that I want to be the representative for all 19 counties, no matter how rural you are.
That was Amy McGrath, the Democratic nominee for Kentucky's 6th congressional district. She's an amazing candidate, and the full version of that campaign video is pretty awesome. Check out votesaveamerica.com, where you can learn about other exciting candidates and competitive races near you, and you can even see a sample ballot so that you're ready to vote on Election Day.
That's our show. Dan?